I could have done a couple videos on this subject, but it would have been a little bit redundant because I'm going to answer the question inside the same video. First of all, is your martial arts that you study or train in, is it reality based? Number one, and is it functional? That would have been the title of both of those videos, but basically they're interrelated. So what I'm saying in essence is this: what I've noticed here lately is that some of the mixed martial arts guys have been ragging on traditional martial arts, saying that traditional martial arts are not effective in a street encounter or street fight, that they're outdated, and that a lot of the martial arts that you see traditionally, kung fu, karate, and so forth, are fantasy types of martial arts. In other words, before the advent of the internet and YouTube and all of these other various video platforms, you were not able to fully recognize the legitimacy of arts. Yes, as I said, before the internet, most of us had no way of really measuring the legitimacy of martial arts during the 60s and 70s at least, and even the early 80s, because there was no way to really see it on a worldwide scale as to how effective it really was. Most of our exposure to martial arts during those earlier years were what we saw on television programs, and of course the martial arts movies that came to the theaters that were made popular by film stars like Lo Lee, Jimmy Wang Yu, Gordon Liu, Bruce Lee, during those years of martial arts popularity, late 60s, early 70s, and even 80s. Along came Sho Kosugi during the ninja movies and so forth. So, with that said, our real contact with martial arts was just by way of what we saw on film, on celluloid at the time, and then television, Kung Fu series with David Carradine, and so forth. And then we began to see martial arts schools open in America because of that boom, martial arts boom, as it were, Bruce Lee era. And there were karate schools, kung fu schools, judo schools, and so forth during those days. But since the internet, everything's out there. And since the UFC, everything is out there. We've seen people challenge, we've seen real street fights online, and we've seen guys purporting to be masters be defeated by a street fighter. We've seen guys that claim to be great Wing Chun fighters, Aikidoists, karate fighters, and so forth, and even boxers defeated by ground fighters and such. So that's pretty much the way it has gone. So basically, here in the recent maybe 2 decades, we've come to a point of weeding out the taff, if you will, or the chaff. Those schools that were really not legitimate, and even these upstarts that are really not legitimate. When I say legitimate, I mean that don't have a solid foundation of fighting structure. You have to have some fundamentals as it relates to self-defense. You have to have some fundamentals as it relates to protecting yourself and even fighting. I hate to use the term fighting, but it is what it is. When you're talking about the martial arts, I don't subscribe to the, I guess you can say, the rhetoric from these MMA guys that traditional karate and traditional kung fu and any traditional art doesn't hold its weight in a street fight, because it does. Before there was ever any so-called MMA, there were traditional arts. As a matter of fact, many of the practitioners and many of the participants in the MMA came from traditional martial arts backgrounds, and that's their foundation in their art. They just picked up other arts like boxing, if you will, or shoot fighting, or wrestling, or jiu-jitsu, and added to their repertoire. So I'm not going to buy that, traditional martial arts don't work in the street. It does. It's effective. It's the discipline of the individual. It has been around, or they have been around, for hundreds, some of them, and some of them even thousands of years, and they are effective. And what gets me is a lot of these young upstarts in the MMA, some of them are not even 50 years old yet. not even 60 years old yet, and they're still wet behind the ear, and they think because they have a little bit of fame, a little bit of popularity, all of a sudden they can throw shade at traditional martial arts. I'm a traditional martial artist, and I'm also a non-traditional martial artist. In other words, I began that way under a few disciplines, and at a certain point in my career, I let a lot of it go because I found what was useful for me, brother teacher, and what was not useful, I got rid of it. It's just really that simple. I realize, I understand, I overstand when these arts were created. They were not created in this day and time. And so they were created for a certain day and time, even though the principles, the foundations, the rudiments are popular, they are effective, and they were effective during that time. They are functional even for today. I, for example, today don't believe that unless you are keeping a particular traditional art alive for the sake of keeping it alive and its history and so forth, in the form of the language, the customs, the traditions, and even the kata or the hones. If you're keeping it alive for that reason, I'm okay with that. But me personally, I don't believe from a self-defense standpoint that you need to learn 30, 40, 50 katas. I don't buy that. I believe that every art, irrespective of where it's from across this planet, as long as you have the proper structure, the proper foundation, and it is and has been proven effective in a combative situation, then that's all you need. You don't need to learn 30 katas, 40 katas, 50 katas, 60 katas, unless you're keeping that particular founder's art alive for generations to come. I don't particularly subscribe to that myself. I respect my Chinese martial arts instructors, my Japanese martial arts instructors, my Korean martial arts instructors, and my American martial arts instructors, and everybody else that I've learned under, and even continue to learn from many. But I don't have to learn your culture completely because that's not my culture. It's really that simple. I'm independent, I'm an individual, and I stand on it. It's really that simple. So, again, for any art to be effective, it must be reality based, and you must train as close to reality as far as streets are concerned in your dojo, your dojang, your kun, your garage, your basement, your living room, wherever it is that you're training. You must train as if you're actually in a street fight. Then you will say to yourself, these things I learned traditionally, I can let them go. These things that I have learned traditionally that work for me, I'll hold on to these. The concepts, the principles are what makes the art work. Not amassing a lot of katas, a lot of useless techniques. If they work, then they work. And if they don't, they won't. Brother teacher out. What do you think?